Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode on the road to 2000. So without wasting any time, let's get into the game. On this game, I started with the king's pawn opening to d4. My opponent then played the king's pawn to e6. Then I played the king's pawn to e4, controlling the center. Then my opponent played the French defense with pawn to b6. This is the normal variation. Then I played knight to c3. My opponent then played bishop to b7, the orange defense. Then I played pawn to d5, looking for the pawn exchange. Then my opponent ignored it and then played queen to e7. Then I went for the pawn exchange. Then my opponent took back with the pawn. Then I played knight to f3, continuing with my development. Then my opponent played knight to c6. Then I played bishop to d3. Then my opponent castled the queen side. Then I played bishop to e3. Here I had a very big miss. I played the right piece, but I played with the wrong square. I should have played bishop to g5, forking the queen, opening the queen to the rook. Of course, my opponent can play knight to f6, covering the fork, but I could play pawn to e5 and winning the knight. So that's why that was a very big miss. But then after playing bishop to e3, my opponent then played queen to f7 after discovering that attack. Then I played knight to d4, looking for a knight exchange. My opponent accepted, and then I took back with the bishop. Then my opponent played king to b8. Then I played pawn to f3. Then my opponent played bishop to e7. Then I played queen to e2. My opponent then pinned my knight to the king. After that, I played bishop to a6, looking for a bishop exchange. My opponent then ignored it and played bishop to a8. Ignoring was the correct move, but playing the bishop was the wrong move. The best move was to play pawn to d6. But then my opponent played bishop back to a8. Then I played queen to c4. Then my opponent captured the knight. Then I took back with the bishop. Capturing with the queen was the correct move here, but even capturing with the bishop still works. Then after my opponent played pawn to d5, then I went for the pawn exchange, and my opponent took back with the bishop. And then I played queen to d6. This is an inaccuracy because there's this move with the castling on the queen side, and of course the bishop cannot take because it's checkmate. So hence that was the best move, castling the queen side. But then I moved queen to d4. Then my opponent played knight to f6, and then I castled the queen side because I saw the idea of capturing the rook. But now it doesn't work because the rook is protected by the rook on the, I think, on the dark square, but they're both on the square, but on the further side is that on h8. But then my opponent played rook to g8. Then I played pawn to a3. Then my opponent played knight to d7. Then I played queen to d3, which is a mistake. Then my opponent capitalized on the mistake and played knight to c5, going for a fork. But then my opponent didn't take the bishop and instead played knight to a4, attacking the wrong bishop. Attacking that light squared bishop was the correct move, but attacking the dark squared bishop is the wrong move because it doesn't pose any danger, but the light squared bishop poses a danger to the king. And then I played bishop to e5 because I didn't want to lose the pawn that covers the king, or remove it out of the covering file. Then my opponent played pawn to h5. Then I played pawn to b4, trapping the knight.